July 3rd, 2002. It's Wednesday at the track. Grands was wearing a beige corduroy sport coat. He was such a stoic man. He never exuded any narcissism, even though he had the horsepower. A damn good-looking man, and that beige corduroy popped laying next to his olive skin and hazel eyes. The man had an amazing head of hair, but he still covered it with a straw hat. Costello thought it was an embellishment to his style. Grands didn't have a style. His mere presence was style. The hat was simply there to protect his face from the sun. Grand's mother passed from skin cancer that went untreated and ultimately laid her to rest. One of the traits Costello couldn't help but admire about Grands was his wit. There wasn't a soul who could fire away at him without Grands having some quip he'd logged in his mental table of contents. The heat was excruciating on this Wednesday, and nobody could pick a horse to make the day any better. Grands could make an airplane crash pleasant, though. He had a way with words, and more importantly, a way to make something horrible into something worthwhile. Costello was coming of age, and it was finally a moment when he stopped Grands right in the middle of putting his silver tongue to work, just as someone in the group lost a substantial bet. He leaned into Grands and said, "How does any of this make anyone feel better?" Grands went silent for a moment and eerily turned towards Costello. He said, "All of us are highly fortunate to be here in this moment. The sun is shining down on us. We have each other. More importantly, we have these drinks, and no one can take that from us." Grands raised his glass and asked everyone to join him. He belted out this toast: "Here's to dreams of crippled soldiers crossing the bridge to Valhalla before the firebird catches their scent." August 24th, 2024. Costello woke up and finally remembered that moment. All of the toasts made sense. As a kid, Costello would act like he wasn't part of the festivities, while he was secretly taking it all in and trying to figure out these elders. All his visits to the track, and one thing was missing: sharing it with a friend. The only problem Costello had was he never really knew who was his closest friend. Then he thought about it. Why was it Manny came through his memory when he was searching for answers during his drunken episodes? Was Manny the friend he missed out on as a close companion? He certainly felt safest with him. Manny was a blessing for Costello, the one guy who would join in on any venture he would traverse. Manny allowed Costello, Aaron at the time, to be free and figure himself out. Most of the other co-workers were rather judgmental. Capturing a Southern California persona was like catching lightning in a bottle. Having a friend like Manny was a godsend. Costello felt sick knowing he had a chance at a true lifelong friend. Instead, he trusted his amateur instincts and decided to protect himself from any heartbreak, and didn't allow Manny to comfort him in his clumsy evolution. Sadly, turns out Manny wound up under a delivery truck, and Costello would never have the opportunity to embrace Manny for the grace he carried himself with or the compassion he offered Costello. Manny didn't pass on without an amazing story. Shortly before his death, he chaired an organization for cycling youths. Not just kids who liked cycling, a very special group of kids. He coordinated a group of deaf cyclists who were terrified to take to the streets. Cycling is more than pedaling a bike and managing good cardiovascular conditioning. Cycling requires most of the senses. You have to see the terrain and obstacles. You have to feel the temperature and pace yourself based on how to breathe. More importantly, you must be able to hear the surroundings. Many deaf people fear cycling because of missing a horn, an engine, or brakes. That can mean remaining upright or not. Manny led these young cyclists and acted as their ears. Unfortunately, on a cloudy morning in Highland Park, he was doing his job and not to his fault. A delivery truck stopped abruptly, and he was relaying a message back to the group of cyclists. Manny hit the back of the truck and suffered a concussion he didn't recover from. Even in the chaos, not one of the cyclists was deterred from ever cycling again. Manny gave them the courage to keep doing what they loved. Costello channeled Manny's altruism and knew that's why he was the one who came to him when he needed someone to tell him how important it was for him to listen. When Costello flashed back to what he could remember from Manny emphasizing how important it would be for him to listen to the stories of Seattle via his guests, he became curious about him. This cerebral organizing and recycling the microdosing was doing unlocked depths of compassion and empathy he didn't know existed. Sadly, when he investigated to find Manny, this is when he learned about his passing. Other than a sense of closure on a very important chapter in Costello's story, it also allowed him to pay respects to the family. Manny had a wonderful wife who lit up Costello's day while they spoke. It was an entirely new sense of humanity he'd never experienced. Witnessing someone who has lost their person be so uplifting towards someone else, it was as though her grieving tore her down and rebuilt her into someone who found a way to respect those outside of her world who may need comfort as well. She was a genuine gem in a world littered with old styrofoam peanuts. Their son will grow to become a beacon of grace and impetus. Costello ended the call only to regret having never experienced Manny and his beautiful family. He immediately reflected on how fortunate he was to have Avery. Costello took all the psychedelics Avery was recommending and went without the risperidone as planned. A week passed, and he was nearly on a daily dose of 1/4 gram. He was feeling absolutely nothing from the plant medicine while he was dosed. However, his mornings were filling up with memories, atonement, and sometimes repentance. His psychiatrist always emphasized the best dose of psychotropic medication would cause no noticeable change for yourself, though others may see your behavioral variances. This phenomenon just made him feel as though he was sedated from his free will. The mushrooms turned up the contrast on everything he needed to work on personally. He had no doubt Avery sent him down the right path. The itinerary was locked in and he couldn't feel more ready for the tour. He knew he wasn't in the best condition he could be in for such a daunting task, but in reality, he never would be. So now was the time. If there were any calculations made to determine whether or not now was the right time, they would all say no. So Costello decided now was the perfect time. He didn't care anymore about deadlines or markers. Just fucking go before some square changes your mind. He decided Wednesday the 28th was go time. He hadn't even discussed it with Avery. She was focusing on his conditioning, but he knew his body and especially his mind, so there was no stopping him now. He called Avery and asked if she could come over to talk about his plan. She was there in 15 minutes. In fact, she was there with coffee and a plan to get food and drinks. Avery was the queen of socializing. Nothing could stop her. Typically, Costello was slightly concerned with her constant zeal for entertainment, but today he was on her level. He can't keep coveting this tour like he's chasing the Souvenir Henri de Grange. This tour to Maine has its own reward, and he'll get it on his terms. Avery found a sense of pride in Costello for his hasty approach and decided she would agree to let him coach himself through the process. Not that she hadn't been there as a champion for him for weeks. She just saw that he knew how the mission was going to work best for him. They went out and had a wonderful meal, followed up with drinks, and shared quite an evening together. It was the most genuine experience they had together in some time. Costello had 4 days until he would depart Los Angeles for Maine.